Having good knives is a very quintessential and important part about being a good home cook or even a pro cook or chef. You can have a very nice expensive knife like this Takamura over here, but if you don't know how to maintain it or sharpen it, it will utterly be useless. You can obviously choose to send your knives to a knife sharpener, but depending on where you are, that might be actually very difficult to find. So today I'm going to walk through with you how to sharpen a knife, and we're also going to test this knife here that Brendan has, which is an IKEA chef knife, and could we make it better by sharpening it to a good sharpness level at the end. So there are a few ways to test whether a knife is sharp or dull. If you use a knife often on the chopping board, you can feel it, but one little fun experiment is to use a piece of paper and then to just slice off a piece. That's a very sharp Takamura over there that I've sharpened recently. This is the IKEA knife that Brendan has. So you can see it doesn't cut, but rather it tears. And this is exactly what happens with a dull knife. Now, you can also do what I like to call the tomato test. You could use a small tomato, you could use a big tomato, it really doesn't matter. If I use a Takamura, I'm just going to hold the tomato firm and watch. It just slices off without me pressing or putting any pressure, all right? Now, if I use, let's say, a dull knife like this one, for example, it may cut, but not all the way. If I just roll it, it doesn't even cut at all, and I need to put in some pressure. The important thing about a sharp knife is beyond safety, it's also really useful to preserve the texture and freshness of a vegetable or a dish, right? Cleaner slices means less cell walls are broken, so more moisture is intact. Herbs don't get bruised, herbs gets really nice, fresh to be garnished later on. So let's have an experience test run. Brendan, would you want to come over and feel how your knife compares to mine?
Alright, it's a bit sad. This has been with me for about the past 2 or 3 years. Then again, there is a night and day difference.
Now there are two ways you can sharpen a knife, a more Western style versus a more Japanese style. Personally, I'm a much bigger fan of the Japanese style of sharpening knives, which is a much more shallower angle at around 15 degrees, whereas the Western style is much more bigger of an angle, so around 18, 20, even 25 degrees. But you know, there are upsides and downsides. The Japanese style has a much more sharper edge, but they go blunt much more faster, whereas the Western style stays sharp for a longer period of time, but it's not as sharp as the Japanese style. Alright, let's get started. The first thing you're going to need are whetstones. Now, whetstones come in different shapes and sizes. The most important thing that you need to check is the grit size, and that's the number that corresponds to the coarseness of the stone itself. You will want a lower number, say around 100 to 500, to completely profile a really blunt knife, and you want something that's a bit higher, like say 3000 to 8000, to maintain or just refine an edge. You can go as high as you want, upwards to even 10,000, which I have over here, but this is really a bit overkill if you're just a normal home cook. Now, the one thing that I would highly recommend avoiding is the conventional stones that you see in the Asian markets. Those stones are quite soft, so you're actually sharpening the stone more than the actual steel itself. Now, what's optional is a whetstone holder. You don't really need this unless you want to go all out. And you can also add on a strobing block, or in my case, a piece of leather from a belt that I no longer use. And I'll show you what this does later on. So the first thing you want to do is actually soak your whetstones for at least 20 to 30 minutes until the bubbles all stop. This makes the stones much more firm, and this makes the sharpening experience much more effective. So we're going to take out our stand over here, and we're going to put in the coarsest whetstone I have, and I'm going to start reprofiling the entire edge, right? So I'm going to start off here on the stone, and I'm just going to lift it up to the angle I want. So I'm going to go somewhere quite low at 17. The idea here is I'm going to sharpen on one side first at the particular angle I've chosen, and continue sharpening it until I get a burr or a roughness from one side. So when the whetstone feels a bit dry, I'm also going to add a bit of water to further moisten it and help on with the sharpening process as well. So as you're sharpening the knife as well, don't forget the tip. So one thing to do about the tip is just to point it forward towards the edge of the whetstone. Just make sure you sharpen the tip as well on the sides of the whetstone. So it's been about 5 minutes or so of sharpening. Now, you can't see this on camera, but when you run your thumb through the blade on any side, you will actually be able to feel what we call a burr. And what a burr is basically if you take a knife and you sharpen it, it actually starts crossing over just like that to the edge, and it's something protruding out towards the edge of the knife over here. And once you can feel a burr on the side that you just sharpened, you can then sharpen the other side until the burr forms on that side as well. So because I sharpen this way, the burr will appear on this side, and I'm going to change my direction here and continue sharpening until a burr forms on this side as well. That's when we know we've gotten enough material out for the profile, and we can start sharpening it to a very balanced edge. So Brenda, I'm going to get you to come and feel the burr so that you can just represent the audience a little bit.
Oh, so if I flip the other side, it feels very smooth, to be honest. It's like it's going down, like whoo, whoo. But if I feel this edge, it feels like whoo, ka.
So I'm going to start on the other side now. I'm going to repeat the exact same process I did just now. So the method I'm sharpening isn't actually the most traditional method. It's a method that I personally have used because I find it a bit more easier to remember when to flip sides instead of counting every single stroke I do. So once you've gotten a burr on the second side as well, it's time to balance the profile. And the way you can just really do that is you want to go one stroke and then feel whether the burr still exists there or not. And you keep going until the burr slowly disappears completely. And so once it disappears, right, it will start forming on the other side again, and that's when you go to the other side and you flip the direction and you do the other side. And this is when you start balancing both edges, just like that. And I keep repeating this process for maybe 15 to 20 sets. And that's just basically honing down the profile and maintaining in the new profile now. So once this basic profile is done, you can then shift on to a higher grade or higher level whetstone, and that just creates a much more refined, sharper edge overall. Now with the other side, the thing that you want to do is to not be as coarse or as rough as your first profiling. You basically just want to refine the edge. So I'm literally going to push the knife through the stone and get it very equal on both sides. If you want to count, you can kind of count from anywhere between 15 to 30 strokes. Personally, I don't really count. I kind of just go on a very meditative process whereby I just spend about at least 2 to 5 minutes on this whetstone. So quite frankly, once you've done the profiling, the next series of stones are going to be quite straightforward. We're going to just repeat this same process throughout all the different grids. Okay, so we've gotten all the knives sharpened. They've been sharpened to 10,000 grit, and the one thing that I haven't done yet is use this piece of leather from a belt that I no longer use. Now, there's a level of sharpening called strobing, which is basically utilizing leather and further sharpening it. This is going to be much more refined than a 10,000 grit whetstone, and I'm going to show you what's the difference, right? First and foremost, let's just test how sharp this knife is right now. So I've got another piece of paper over here, and watch. It slices really, really well. But the thing is, I have to do what we call a slice cut. I can't push the knife and it doesn't slice, right? So now I'm going to stroke with the leather. Similar to the 10,000 grit whetstone, you want to push this away from the blade of the knife and not cut into it. So once the leather is stroked, we are now able to do what we call the push cut, and let me show you how that looks like. I want you to feel the knife now, and I want you to slice and let everyone know how it feels.
Bro, this is different. This is life-changing.
Now that we sharpened the IKEA knife, right, you can actually take a mediocre knife like this and sharpen it really well, and you can get a much better knife cutting experience. True?
True. Yeah, the only thing, I feel like after everything, the only difference is, the very major difference is the weight and the thickness of the blade itself. Like this IKEA knife is so bloody thick, and if you cut thin stuff, it kind of gets in the way.
Yep.
Yeah, so I think that's the major difference. But in terms of sharpness, in terms of feels of cutting it, I feel it's quite smooth. Everything is it's really nice. So yeah, thank you, Leonard. But I think I'm not gonna use this anymore.
Why not?
Hey.
Okay, so that's our knife sharpening 101. I hope you find the video helpful. If you have an IKEA knife like this, let us know. Would you be able to sharpen it as just what we did? And I hope you learned something today. And if you want to know more about knife sharpening, different types of steel, we did manage to cover a lot of stuff, like the quality of the steel itself and the type of steel itself do play a huge role in edge retention and edge sharpness. But if you want those kind of videos, do let us know. And we'll see you next time. Bye.